Welcome to this episode of Test Drive. Tonight on Test Drive, we're going to be reviewing the Sharp Eye Modern 2. This is a new model that Marcio came up with for sort of smaller, mushier waves. The Modern 2 that we're going to be reviewing tonight is a stock board that we grabbed off the rack here at Sunrise. It's a 5'4", that's 19.5 wide, 2.44 thick, and has a volume of 27.8 liters. Now, the outline of the Modern 2 is real reminiscent of an 80s style twin fin fish that has a few characteristics of more of a high performance thruster board mixed together. It is fuller, it's got sort of a fuller nose, it's wide in the middle, it does have the little hips to bring the tail in, and it has that traditional swallowtail. The Modern 2 has a very, very subtle rocker. It actually looks completely flat on the deck, and when I first looked at the board I didn't think it had any rocker. But what you notice is the bottom of the shape does have some rocker cut out of the bottom. So it has a very flat deck on the top, but the rocker is sort of engaged in the bottom of the board. So I'm assuming it's going to paddle good with the flatter rocker on top, but be a little more performance driven. Now, the bottom contour of the Modern 2 is very subtle as well. It is a double concave, but you can barely feel it when you run your hand across it. It's a little deeper, sort of right above the fins, but very, very subtle, almost hardly noticeable double concave. Same thing with the little bit of V in the tail, right behind the center fin. Just a tiny bit of V that you can barely feel. As far as the rails and the foil of the Modern 2, when you pick it up, the rail feels a little bit more like a performance shortboard rail than a traditional fish. To me, it's not as boxy as an old 70s or 80s fish would be, as far as the shape of the rail. But the way the board is foiled, it's got a bit of thickness in the nose, but it gets really chunky and thick through the center of the board. I mean, the middle of this board, as far as that goes, is a really beefy, full rail. So I can tell that even though this board's a 5'4", it's gonna have more than enough float for me. And as you get towards the tail, it does sort of thin out again and get back down to being a little thinner. So I would say for a twin fin, the Modern 2 probably is going to have a little bit of a performance bite as far as turns and maneuverability goes. So got some little waves out there right now, probably 1 to 3 foot, kind of mushy and disorganized, but that's summertime in Florida, so it's perfect conditions to try out the Modern 2. So we're going to head up to the pier and give it a test drive. Well, we just got back in from the pier, and to say the least, the surf was a little bit challenging, but there was a rideable wave, and it was a lot more fun being on the little Modern 2. As far as how this board paddled, it paddled incredible. It floated me just as good as any of my 5'10s. So don't be worried about going down in size, because this board has a lot of float and is really easy to get into waves and really easy to paddle. I feel like if you're somebody who knows how to really ride a twin fin, this is going to be a super fun twin fin for you to ride, because it does have a little bit of a performance aspect to it. If you don't ever ride twin fins, I think your best bet is to go this route and put the MRs in the board. I was scared to ride this board without a little stabilizer because I've just never really been able to ride twin fins very good. It felt extremely fast. I had no problem getting speed on this board, even as short as it was. It felt very loose, but yet it had drive. But it is a fishy type of feel when you're surfing the board. It definitely does have that skatiness and sort of slidiness to it. For me, the Modern 2 felt really good on my backhand. Now, unfortunately for me, the waves were 99% rights today, so I was only able to get a few lefts, but as far as that goes, it just really was able to bite and turn really smooth and nicely when you were on your backhand. I felt like on certain waves, if I tried to move my feet around at all, it was very sensitive to the touch. So if my back foot moved a little bit where I could do that on my shortboard, when I try and do it on the Modern 2, it was very twitchy and would turn immediately. So you don't have to surf this board very hard. You can kind of let the board do a lot of the work and just try and flow with it and flow with the wave a little bit. So overall, the way I would best describe the Modern 2 is it's a really fun, really fast little board for small, mushy surf. If you're looking for something to sort of spice up your summertime and get out there in the mush and just have a blast, Sharp Eye Modern 2 would be a really good one to consider.